Okay. Appropriate theme music for today, guys.
Well, obviously, we're going to talk Hurricanes today. There's no question.
Toronto Circus is in town. Thank you very much.
Or Tumorutu's trade viability options. I mean, there's a guy I think that we should, we'll stay. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit Maple Leafs and a little bit of other things too. I'm so glad we didn't do the Cranky Hockey Writers show today, Eric, Kevin. At the time, it was like 10:45. Would have been a tough one.
Yeah, I don't think neither Eric or I had been able to do it.
Yeah, we were trying to. I was deciding between yesterday and today, and something told me, let's do it. I mean, just tomorrow or today. Just do it tomorrow. And that was fortunately right because that was news.
I thought you might call and say that Mike was going to do a one-man show today. That going to call, sign in, say hello to Mike, and then turn it over to him, and then we'll all take the afternoon off because I'm sure he.
We probably could.
Yeah.
Mike, take a breath, please.
I have some reading material here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and then I'm going to catch up on.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have Russ apparently, but we don't see you, Russ, or hear you.
Either that, or we have.
He's trying to sell his book.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm trying to.
We hear you.
Farnham there. I mean, he's.
I'm in a different room. Hold on.
Okay, we can hear you very well. Pretty well.
Hold on. Why is this not working?
There you go. I can see you. I can see something at least. I could.
I can't.
You just can't see. I don't know why my Wi-Fi in this. Hang on. I'm trying.
No problem. Well, we already have a ton of viewers for this show. Obviously, people want to talk about the Hurricanes. I was right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to talk about. We definitely want to talk about Anthony Duclair. There he is.
There is a big game coming up this week. I believe the Hurricanes and the Sabres play this week, don't they?
They do. That's a big one. Well, tonight the Sabres play the Devils. So the Sabres are on the Connor McDavid sweepstakes tour this week.
Well, I commented on Monday, that this was a great week for Tank Nation and the Buffalo edition of Tank Nation because Carolina earned 4 points, Edmonton earned 3, Arizona earned 2, and the Sabres had 2 regulation losses to Florida and the Rangers, and they're back to within like reasonable striking distance of 30th, which, I mean, that seems to be the overwhelming feeling and factor in Buffalo is that they want to get that, especially after seeing Eichel and seeing McDavid in the World Juniors, that these players are, they've heard the names, but they haven't seen them that much, and they got a little more exposure with those two players over the last week or so. So I think the hunger for getting down, getting dirty, and getting 30th is still there.
This is pathetic, really sad, and to me, I hate this. This is what I hate about the draft, and I hate about teams tanking. I hate the way this thing runs. I hate the fact that the Hurricanes sit there and fans are upset when their team pulls out a victory. I hate this whole system. I can't stand it. I think it's wrong. I think the team. I don't know the exact answer, but I think every team that doesn't make the playoffs, perhaps, should get an equal shot or something. There needs to be something else because this is just not working, and we're really in for what's going to be a bizarre ending of the season. I think if this gets close, unless Edmonton just decides to run away with it, like they were looking like they were going to do.
Yeah, I disagree with you on that. Just because, we're in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
When your team is poor and weak, you don't have much to be interested in, and this creates a lot of interest. And the modern player, players and coaches never tank.
Yeah.
I think it's always ludicrous when I hear people talk about that because players always play to win.
I agree.
So the only tanking that usually goes on is the GMs sometimes set their team up to. They're in the rebuilding mode, so they anticipate that it's going to be, a struggle. But, fans say what they're going to say. Yeah, I think we all sort of have made our peace with that. So, You can't really legislate it out. To me, the system and the lottery system and the way the draft's set up is the best possible way, because it's the only way that you can give a team that's down at the bottom of the standings a hope of getting back in the mix.
See, but all right, we should talk about this on the show. But we should. But this is a pre-show thing, but let's just start into it. Let's just go. Let's go. All right, here we go. It's the
6th of January. Russ, move your camera down a little bit.
I don't know if I can. Let's see.
That's good.
That's good.
That's fine.
Better.
Oh,
that's better.
Yep, way better. All right, so we'll go Mike, then we'll go Russ, then Kevin, then Josh. Here we go. Smiles. What's going on with my hair? Sorry. All right. Here we go. Hey, Hockey World. It's Tuesday, January 6th, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
That's Russ Cohen.
I'm Russ Cohen.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
I'm Josh.
And we're all just obviously in shock. As we sit here today, a team we don't discuss very often, the Toronto Maple Leafs, have made a very big move. So we thought we would talk. We get a lot of calls that we talk too much about the Hurricanes, about the Predators, about the Panthers. So instead of them today, we're going to go off radar a little bit today and talk about the team in Toronto. It's a city in Canada. I know it's Canada, so it's a little bit scary. And it's a place, it's a big city, and it's got a hockey team that has a lot of supporters. It's, if you go there, believe me, it's a hockey town. So, Mike, today, just a normal day in the life of them, as they, obviously Dustin Byfuglien killed Randy Carlyle.
Wow.
That's all I can think about.
The signs were there in the sense that Brendan Shanahan traveled to balmy Winnipeg on Saturday for that abomination at the MTS Center and saw firsthand how badly the Leafs played. Now, the Leafs had played 5 games in 7 nights, but they're 2-7 in their last 9 games, and from all the indications this morning with Dave Nonis at the press conference, they had been toying with the idea of relieving Randy Carlyle of his duties, off and on throughout the season. And at the 40-game mark, with them,
I want to stop you there for a second. I'm sorry about that. That is something that was brought up, and Josh, you sent out like Chris, reporter Chris, who I think is a great guy. I love Chris. He sends out, and he sent out a tweet. He was just reporting on the press conference that the Leafs had considered this for a while, and that to me is just one of the most. I did not think that the Leafs woke up this morning in a flight of fancy. It said, what we need to do? I got an idea. Let's fire Carlisle. Obviously, they've been thinking about this for a while, and that's one of these things that I don't know. Anyway, Mike, continue. Sorry.
Well, and the thing is that I don't think there was really any serious decision to go down this road until the last couple weeks. I mean, the team had been a roller coaster all year, but the losing streaks had been a couple, maybe 3 games, which are normal for most NHL teams, but in Toronto it got more focused. But this team went 10-1-1 in late November and early December with a lot of home games. Things were going well, 6 games winning streak in a row, and then they started just playing the way that this team has played over the last 2 or 3 years with under 2 different coaches, a lot of shots on goal, a lot of turnovers, the fourth line hardly playing any minutes, playing Phil Kessel 25 minutes. It just started to go down the same road that it went with Ron Wilson and the same road that it went with Carlisle over in previous years. So that's why, Brendan Shanahan and Dave Nonis decided to make the move right now. Now, we'll talk about who's going to carry forth with this team, but the funny thing is, Zach, is that a lot of the focus, in spite of the fact that, a lot of fans got what they wanted in terms of Randy Carlisle being fired, a lot of the focus today is on the core group, and they are taking a lot of the heat. And even Nonis in his press conference said, none of these guys have full no-move clauses. We can make deals, and if the deal is beneficial to this team, we'll make it. I don't think that that's going to happen during the season because, as we've said before, you've got Kessel and you got Phaneuf, with cap hits of $7 and $8 million. It's not going to be easy to move those guys during the season, but I don't think that they're married to anybody on this roster anymore.
Move Kessel, I think. If you wanted to move Kessel, you can move Kessel, I think. That's my opinion. Kev, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for sure you can move Kessel. Well, my take on all this is when I watch that press conference, that to me, if I'm a Maple Leafs fan, what I'm most bothered about is the assertion by Dave Nonis that this team is capable of playing the way that it needs to in order to be successful. Right. Now, the interpretation of that for me was that I believe I have a contending team and it's underachieving, and I just don't buy that. I don't believe it. That hey, look, Randy Carlyle, his mission was to make this team better. And he, especially defensively this season, he was unable to do that. He's paying a price for that. That's standard operating procedure. We all accept that. But to me, when I look at this team, and I know what Nonis is saying, and from the short-term perspective, you look at it, and they were a team that I went. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 10-1-1 in a 12-game
correct
stretch. But I remember in that stretch, they gave up 27 goals. Right. Now. That's a decent goals against average, but that's not an upper echelon team caliber defensive effort. And when I look at this team, I don't see a team that's hard to play against. I don't see a core group that I think plays the style of hockey that will allow you to be successful in the playoffs. I see a very talented group, and I think it's a team that has more scoring depth than they've had in the past. But I think it's a roster that's in need of several changes, bringing in players who, in my opinion, are more playoff style of performers, guys who, it's one thing, anybody can play defense because it's about commitment over talent for a short period of time. This is a parity league. The Buffalo Sabres, for about a 10-game period, look like the best team in the league.
Right.
You can do that in a parity league. Every dog gets its bone.
Right. That's a good way of putting it. That's absolutely
but for the extended period, is this team really capable of playing, championship caliber hockey? I just don't think so. So, to me, what's lost on today is that from a short-term fix, it was a move that had to be made. It was a move that was predicted, in the preseason. But in the long term, no matter who you bring in, they're going to look at this roster and say, yeah, but we don't have the right guys. The right mix is not here. And that's not an indictment on every player. I mean, there's some talent here. I'm just saying you need guys who have been around the block, who know how to be successful in the postseason. And this team is just short of those players.
I want to get Russ in on this, but let me just say this briefly because I just heard this in the last 15 minutes. J.S. Jaguar, who played with most of this core group a few years ago, he went on Toronto radio and basically said this core group will never play two-way hockey. That they'd rather play pond hockey than play what it takes to win in the NHL, and that's been proven out. And he went on to say that they just the mentality of this group is to play a wide open offensive game. And like Kevin said, during that 10-1-1 streak, I think they averaged around 4 goals a game. Their offense was going, top notch at that point, but they started to fall into the old habits of, because they were limiting teams to around 30 shots a night, which for them was pretty good. But then as they started to score goals, they started to lose that thought process of we got to play in our own zone as well, and they started to play loose. And Carlisle saw this coming and warned of it, but it just went on deaf ears. And then when they stopped scoring at that pace, they went down the tubes.
Russ, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a say. Spend too much money on those key players, like you said. They have a lot of offensive puck movers, but they still have maybe 1 or 2 guys that actually play defense for real, and that's still a big problem. And that's been a problem. They've never addressed it in the draft. They keep going offense. They expect to win games 6-4, I guess. I mean, until they really turn that around and say, okay, we've got to get tougher players. Guys like JVR, Kessel, these are not tough players. They're finesse guys, and Lupo, they've got a load of finesse guys, and this isn't the 80s anymore, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Josh?
And how about what Ron Wilson said also on another Toronto radio station this morning on TSN Radio, saying Phil's problem is he's 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. You can't rely on Phil. Some core players have failed under 2 or 3 coaches. You have to surmise some are uncoachable now. You can't rely on Phil. When he's not playing well, he's a hard guy to get on board. He comes and goes and gets emotional. He lets it affect his game and his relationship with other players. I mean, it just seems Phil Kessel's getting the brunt of the criticism here.
We know that Ron Wilson doesn't have any ulterior motives or vested interest in criticizing the Leafs right now.
Well, but to be fair, like both. I mean, I think what Kevin says is exactly right. That's exactly the opinion I would get from this too. It's just that, okay, you've had 2 coaches in there, 2 coaches who are relatively known for being able to coach defensive hockey too. Like, I mean, Babish especially, right? So, I mean, there's if we're sitting here and saying they need to play. Obviously, Babish and Wilson knew that they needed to play more defensive hockey. This is something that they tried to do, and they both ended up in the same place where the only way they were going to win games were to outscore other teams, and they both ended up that's where they were, So, I'm sorry, Carlisle, not Babish. I don't know why I call him. I'm sorry,
Babish. They look the same.
I know. I always screw them up together. But I think they both ended up in this spot where the only way we can win is by outscoring the team.
With regard to Kessel, again, if you put Kessel on the Boston Bruins and he plays on that team, it doesn't matter that he is not a strong two-way player. His mission on that team would be to score goals, and they would love to have him right now because he's got a team full of guys who can play strong defensive one-on-one hockey. But the problem in Toronto is that Kessel is the flag carrier of that team, and he sets the tone, and the team doesn't have a bunch of guys who can play strong defensively. So, his lack of being difficult to play against is far more evident. If he were on another team, it probably wouldn't be the issue that it is now.
Right.
I mean, the thing is, go ahead, Russ. Go ahead, Ray.
No, I was going to say, he doesn't lead. He's never been a leader. When I covered him in the World Juniors, there was a lot expected of him, and he fizzled in that too because of the on and off factor. That on and off factor is for real.
Yeah, but the thing is, the Leafs are not asking Phil Kessel to all of a sudden be a Selke Trophy nominee. They just want him to at least, come back into the defensive zone, take a straight line to the point man on, off of the face-off, do the basic things. And if you watch the game against Winnipeg, he was like all the way at the red line when four of his teammates were in the defensive zone. I mean, he's out there playing stretch hockey or being a goal hanger, and honestly, it just you cannot do that in the NHL with and he continues to do that. But it's not just Kessel, it's Phaneuf. Apparently, Chris Johnston said that there is a split in that locker room, and I can believe that with the number of personalities.
That's a shock.
Yeah, there's a shock. I mean,
if there's ever been a team that's looked like they play with a split in the locker room, a couple things real quick. Wilson, first of all, Ron Wilson just has no problem throwing players under the bus in his career. Have you noticed this? I mean, you go back through his career. I mean, remember what he did in San Jose? I mean, he just he went after Patrick Marleau like no one's business, right? So, I mean, that aside, you don't need Kessel to play defense, but you do need Kessel to give effort because he's one of the leaders on the team, and players will follow in that. He's got to give the effort, right? So that's where we got to see. And I think that Kevin.
Yeah, no, that's right on. That's what's missing, and Russ is also right on as well. The problem is that he's in a leadership role in Toronto, and he is not equipped for that position. He's a quiet guy. I remember talking to some Boston writers, and it was of their opinion that Kessel was not a bad guy. He was just shy, and he's just never been able to kind of overcome that. And I think that all of this basically, it's never one thing, as we all know. It's a very complicated situation in Toronto where the leadership core is not right, the core group is not right, the core group is more offensive. I mean, the stats in this case tell it all. They're number 2 in goal scoring and 25th in team defense.
Right.
When you have that much disparity, you can't win in the NHL. It's got to be tighter. So.
And dead last in shots allowed.
Yeah.
30th overall, and with all the focus that they've put towards puck possession and the analytics department that they've hired and all these things, they end up at right back at the bottom of the league in puck possession and shots allowed. And when you're facing 35 to 40 shots a night regularly, I don't care if you have Terry Sawchuk in goal, you're probably gonna lose. But the thing is though, this is not going to be. And I know that you and a number of people have mentioned the possibility of big name coaches coming in. There's a report that the Devils would allow the Leafs to talk to Peter DeBoer. The name of Bylsma has been out there. I'm telling you right now, I would be genuinely shocked if Peter Horachek is not the interim coach for this team for the remainder of the year, because this team will not hire a full-time head coach until they get a crack at Mike Babcock in the summer.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention someone who you could also see on the bench in Toronto with a really good relationship with Brendan Shanahan is former London Knights coach Mark Hunter. I would not be surprised to see him maybe as an assistant. I don't know. I don't think he'd be the head coach, but obviously there's a big connection between him and Shanahan. And Mark left the London Knights. I want to say, what was it, 2 months ago?
Well, no, he's their assistant GM, but I mean, I don't think he's gonna step out of management to go behind the bench on an interim basis. I mean, Horachek was the interim head coach with the Panthers. He's an experienced guy, been an assistant in Nashville and a few other places.
They're gonna need another guy on the bench, though, right?
Kevin. He did a good job. Horachek did a good job with the Panthers. Like I know not everyone loves analytics, but there is some on Twitter. I saw the Panthers' performance level charted analytically, and it showed after Horachek took over. And in terms of puck possession, they rose dramatically. He had a real impact with his system on their ability. And I watched that team last, as you all know, I like the sort of the Panthers management team, and I watched that team a lot, and I thought they were a much better team when he took over. So I think that would actually be a good choice on an interim basis. And if we assume they do want Babcock, I agree with Mike completely that they'll wait it out and see. Plus, there'll be more guys available if you wait till the summer. But I think the best fit in my mind is DeBoer. Because Babcock could stay with Detroit. I think it's a real distinct possibility. And I know there's been a lot of talk about whether or not Toronto will make him the first $5 million coach and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just not sure. Does Babcock really want to put himself in the middle of that mess?
Oh, Lord,
he's a guy that likes his family time, and he likes to do things his way. And the media experience in Toronto is going to be far different than the one he faced in Detroit. I mean, he's well aware of that. He's seen it at the Olympics, but there's a difference from doing it for 2 weeks and doing it all. So, at what point, would the money just be so overwhelming that he'd have to, factor that in? And to be honest, I think Detroit is a better team and closer to, being able to compete for a cup. So I circle back now to DeBoer. And, what we know about DeBoer and what we've seen is, in Florida, they weren't pleased with him because he was too defensive. And in New Jersey, I felt he took an average team and they overachieved both defensively and offensively, and he took it to the final. He had a no-name defense. The mantra around the league after that Devils' run to the Cup is, well, if the Devils can do it with that defense and get to the final, we can do it with what we have.
Right.
That was the mantra, because their defense was just looked adequate. So I think he's a good coach, and I think the roster was a problem in New Jersey, but I think Toronto's roster's more interesting for a coach than Jersey's. So step up,
It's not exactly.
for him. So but I still think we gotta adjust the roster in Toronto, and there have to be changes made, and I'm sure there will be this summer.
There have to be, Russ.
I'll tell you who I go with. I go with Tom Rennie. I mean, he was just in that building. He just won a gold medal. He's a good teacher. Why not give him the job on an interim basis? Sometimes he clicks with players. A lot of times he can get players to rally around him. He's a smart guy. He's not a combative guy. He is a guy that will look at analytics, but he's also a guy that teaches. And at the end of the day, I think they need someone to sort of teach them all over again. And he's gone on second-half runs with teams, winning 30 out of 32 games. I would give him the interim job and see how he does.
I don't know how anxious he would be to bail on Hockey Canada, who just won a gold medal with, and he's in the Bob Nicholson position with them. I don't see him jumping that ship and going to the one that's possibly sinking, that's taken a couple of torpedoes like the Leafs have. I mean right now. Yeah, well, that too. I mean, money. Okay, Johnny Manziel, but what I think is, I think that it's probably going to be Horachek, and it's probably going to be because Steve Spott was a head coach with Kitchener, did a very good job with the Marlies, is well liked in that organization. So I think that you can have Horachek as the interim head coach and Spott, and maybe they add an assistant to help them out for the remainder of the season. DeBoer and Spott go back a long way, and I know that Spott is liked in the organization. Not to say that that's going to stop Shanahan from trying to hit a home run with a coach in the offseason, but DeBoer could be a possibility. Paul McLean, I know that Shanahan has some connection with him going back to the Detroit organization. If Babcock does not leave Detroit, which I personally think he's not going to, because I agree with Kevin, the Red Wings are much deeper, much more stable organization than Toronto is. But I think Shanahan has to take the chance and go into the summer and say, I'll throw you this money, I'll give you player personnel director type of, because I think we all know that at the end of the season, Dave Nonis is probably gone too. There's probably going to be a massive reorganization of the Leaf franchise with Shanahan. Mark Hunter may step up as the new GM or in a larger role, and that Nonis, they're gonna hang all the failures, the mistakes of the Clarkson contract and some of the trades that they made around Nonis's neck, and that they'll start completely anew. And they'll probably have that new guy in place before they hire the coach. So I don't think there's going to be anything other than an interim coach in there in the next couple days.
Well, then what are you doing? This is my thing. What are you doing if that's the case? You're in the playoffs right now. This team is in the playoffs right now. So if you're going to wait, you figure Notice is gone at the end. You're in the playoffs right now. This is not a team that's desolate. They are in the battle. So. Obviously, you look at Carlisle, and these weren't his assistant coaches, right? These assistant coaches were brought in and given to him. So that changed. Why is Nonis not going with Carlisle? That's a big question in my mind. I don't get that at all. I think that the fact that you're letting Nonis hire the next coach and perhaps take you through a trade deadline.
No, what I'm saying, Ak, is that Nonis is not going to be able to hire. Is not going to hire the new head coach. If Nonis was staying, then I think they would be hiring a permanent head coach. But I don't.
If he's not staying, then why is he there now? Why would you keep him there now?
Well,
this is the time at this point, right here and now. Shanahan takes over as interim GM, and then bring in another coach. Just admit what you're doing.
I honestly don't think Shanahan wants to focus on himself right now. I think he wants, he's overseeing everything. He's basically the GM making the decisions without having to have the title GM. He's got the support structure with Hunter, with Kyle Dubas, with a couple other people, and he can basically do what he's been doing, which is staying in the background and pulling the strings, while Nonis is the one handling the press conferences and taking the heat. And at the end of this year, they will reevaluate, and it's only my own personal opinion that Nonis is probably gone because they're probably going to have to throw another body into the volcano as a sacrifice.
You don't need to reevaluate. You just need to evaluate. I mean, look at what's going on with the players that are there now. I mean, it's just not put together like a good team. And honestly, he has done nothing differently than Brian Burke did before, and he's stuck. It's the same. It feels like the whole path has stayed the same to me. I mean, Nonis has really stayed on that, and I actually think Burke did a better job at building the team towards the future than Nonis has. So, but beyond that, I don't know. It's very confusing to me, and it's a really weird move in a lot of ways. I mean, at the time and the timing of it. Obviously, I guess they decided on this probably before the World Juniors, but they didn't want to upstage the World Juniors in Toronto. That's the impression I got.
Yeah, according to what they were saying, Carlisle was told last night at some point during the World Junior game, and they did not announce it until this morning because they didn't want to rain on the parade of the World Junior, especially in their own building. But I mean, Nona said the reason that he fired Carlisle was because the team had just continued to be inconsistent, and then this most recent downswing was just the last straw. I mean, I don't think they were looking to, I don't think they wanted to fire Carlisle. I think they wanted to keep him for, through the year, but they saw that that things were trending downward, and they just didn't think that they could pull out of it with him as the head coach. I don't personally agree with it because I don't think the flaws of this team have anything to do with Randy Carlisle. It's the core group. It's always been the core group, and they will be, I think, exploded in the summer. I think that Shanahan is going to go into that room with a thresher and destroy that room. I think he's going to move a lot of players out.
No, well, we'll see.
The Leafs traded a very well-liked player at the Winter Classic last year, so they make weird moves at weird times all the time.
That's right, they did. Yeah, that's I know. They do. Their timing, I think they're so convinced that they don't want anyone to leak a story that they just pick the weirdest possible time to do it so that no one can leak a story because they're so nervous about their stories getting out there ahead of time. I mean, they did a good job at hiding this. They did, no one found out about it until it happened. And that's impressive in and of itself in that market. So
Yeah.
that's no small task. So let's move on to the World Juniors. So yes, last night, second period, 5-1. Kevin, I'm thinking Kevin said 5-1. This is I thought you were right on, and I had the Russians, and it turned into a heck of a game.
Yeah, but Canada was so impressive. That was a good U.S. team. And if you're the Americans, what you say as well. It turns out Russia was better than we thought they were, and Canada certainly. Well, that was an exceptional team. That was an NHL line that they had. Max Domi and Reinhart were impressive, and we finally kind of see why Canada is always the favorite going into every World Junior tournament. They have such a collection of players every year that they just replenish. And I thought this group though was really good. I really love their if I can use sort of a scouting phrase, their compete level. Like when they played against the Americans, they were a team that was really difficult to play against. Like the Americans would make a play and there'd be a Canadian right in their face. I was very impressed with that Canadian team.
I really think that since they since the U.S. won in Russia in the World Juniors and kind of embarrassed Canada in that it feels like Canada's been a different team. It felt like that was a turning point, at least at these World Juniors for me. But Russ, you know way more about this than I do. And honestly, I was on the Russian bandwagon because you've been on the Russian bandwagon too. I know you had Russia to win the tournament.
I did. Canada never locked down that game, and even when people were sort of ripping me in a fun way on Facebook, hey, it's 5-1, I'm like, listen, they've been behind before. I wouldn't count this game in the bag yet, and Canada never did lock it down. Russia was right in it till the bitter end with 3.9 seconds. So those are sort of the breaks. Canada did have a very good team. But I will say, look, Russia's been medaling since 2011. And so, that seems to not even get talked about anymore because we're so worried about Canada's next medal that we can't even give, another team credit for that. Heaven's right. The U.S. team lost to a good Russian team, but But this tournament's always about seeding. And look, I'm pretty sure that Curtis Lazar knows that was goaltender interference. It was a bad call, and it affected the seeding. But at the end of the day, if the U.S. would have beaten Russia, then it wouldn't have mattered. So I always say the best teams make it, and they did, and Canada made it. But, again, I don't want to even overemphasize Connor McDavid, because if I go back, I can look, and Alexander Daigle had 10 points in the World Juniors too. McDavid was very good. I don't think this World Juniors made him better, though. Not in my eyes, but I know in a lot of writers' eyes it did, because it's the first time they're really seeing him.
Yeah.
Well, Russ, I think he improved. I mean, you have to remember, he was out for 5 weeks before the tournament. I think he really improved, and his impact really grew as the tournament went on. I mean, I thought he was very good yesterday, even in a two-way aspect as well. He was really effective on providing backside pressure. He had the breakaway goal. What I have to give credit for is, the Russians could have very easily folded at a couple of times when the Team Canada gets the goal, 23 seconds into the first period, and there's a few physical confrontations, and then all out of nowhere, Barbashev throws himself in a flying body wedge at somebody. And I thought he'd been watching too many Steve Downey videos, because the Russians really physically responded to Team Canada's pressure, got that goal to make it 2-1, and it was a game. But then Canada turned it on, and then they get 3 goals. The Russians come back and get 3 goals in 3 minutes and 16 seconds, and it was a game. I mean, I think for all the critics of Zach Fucale, I mean, he really, I thought, played very well in the third period, and Canada sort of shut down the Russians and kept them to the outside. They only had a few real good opportunities in the third. But, Canada approached this tournament differently than they had in the past. They just brought an all-star team. They brought all their skill guys, and guys like Brendan Point and Virtanen, and all these depth players. They provided little snippets of help to the real big core players like Duclair and Domi and Reinhart and McDavid, and that, I think, was the key for Canada winning.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, the U.S. team not having Christian Dvorak killed them, because he's up to 69 points playing for the London Knights. He just got Player of the Week. How does this guy not make the U.S. team? And I heard it happened to be because he decided he was going to go to extra.
Uh-oh. We lost him.
Yeah, the other loss for the Americans was Santini as well.
Yeah.
He had an injury and couldn't play. But the point I want to make about Connor McDavid is, for the majority of players who are draft age in this tournament, it can help them, because you see them against top-notch competition in their age group, and if they play real well, scouts tend to give them a little bump in the rankings. But when you're where Eichel and McDavid are, it can only hurt you. Their status is so well established that all they can do is hurt that status. And I think for Eichel it sort of worked that way. And I'm talking about from public opinion, not from the scouts. I think the scouts, view it. They know that an 18-year-old player is going to have some down moments. Now, it was a little surprising to me. It's the first time I had seen Eichel when he did some uncharacteristic stuff, like seemed to be more interested in making a hit than doing what he does best. But I mean, it wasn't anything that was should be an indictment of his potential as an NHL player. I mean, you saw the stuff that excites the NHL scouts. He's an amazing player. He's a powerful skater. He makes things happen. But in this particular tournament, he just wasn't at his best. But I think that even though fans have sort of viewed it as, McDavid clearly established himself as number one, I think the scouts will sort of sift through that and say, well, it was just one tournament, and his line mates didn't perform as well either. It was sort of a combination of factors. So I don't think Eichel is going to slip out of the top two because of what happened. I think people get what a great player he is.
No, but Hanifin how was Hanifin in your mind, Russ?
He was okay. I mean, he's a young guy. He was making some good blocks. He showed off a good point shot. He did move the puck around well on the power play. I think he did well. I don't think he was a leader. He really couldn't be. There were older defensemen there like Butcher, and so I think at the end of the day he played well enough. And I think with Eichel too. I mean, I didn't see anything bad out of Jack Eichel. I didn't see superstar, but you don't always get superstar. I saw superstar out of Dylan Larkin, and I saw how maybe in that game against Canada he didn't get double shifted at the end. It kind of bothered me. He was the hot hand. And then even against Russia, I didn't see him get used more than he should have really in the third period to try and spark the team. He was their best player, but it seemed like they were so married to Eichel that they had a better player under their nose, and they didn't really utilize him enough at the end.
I completely agree with that. I was talking yesterday a little bit about your show that I was listening to over the weekend, where you guys played this weekend, and it was your preview of the World Juniors, and it was pretty kind of unfair to you guys. That's on XM in the middle of the World Juniors, and I know you guys nailed it. I mean, you guys were all over this, and all over Dylan Larkin especially. And my gosh, yeah, I mean, he showed so much.
I have a question for Russ because we have him on here. We need to take advantage of that because he is one of the leading experts on prospects. And, I've sort of had this theory that Dylan Larkin, even though he's projected as a number 2 center, Russ, I think he might be a 1B center, the type of guy who, could actually be a top center in this league. With the speed he has and the instincts and the IQ, it seems to me that he has the potential to be a number 1 center in this league. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree. I think he can be a number 1 center. I think he's added more speed than I remember him having even at the All-American Prospects game a year ago. He has a great hockey IQ, and he's got that kind of drive that he will just not let anything stop him. And it's very hard to defend him as a result because he's got that will. He shields the puck really well. He's got a good reach. I really do think he has all the makings of a number 1 center. And I'll be honest, when he was drafted, I knew he was somewhere between 15 and 20 as a talent, and I was thinking top 6, but now you're right. I am thinking top 3 for sure.
Well, another guy who I think really helped his stock in the draft is for next year is Lawson Krause for Canada. He is a big body kid, but has enough speed, and I think he's 6'4". And he's somebody that I know he was projected to be maybe a pick in the teens. Now I think he's at least a top 10 pick and could move up into the top 6 or 7. For a team looking for a power forward, and if you can find a player with size that can stay up with the pace in the NHL, that's a valuable commodity. So I think he did himself a lot of favors in the World Junior this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think somewhere between 9 and 12, he really showed a lot of poise with the puck and really a lot of offense while playing a very responsible game, too.
Who stuck out to you, Russ, in this tournament? I mean, it's a big, major question. I understand that. But I just, in terms of, you've seen these guys play more than we have. Who looked like they were, stepping up to another level?
Tolchinsky. This is a great story. He was in a dev camp for the Rangers and the Hurricanes, totally unsigned. The Hurricanes signed him. This is an undrafted guy, and this is where it makes sense if you're a team and you invite guys to your dev camp. I would invite 20 guys to my dev camp every year if I was allowed to, because every once in a while you're going to find a guy like this. And He was stepping up and scoring in big opportunities. The bigger the game, the better he played. He got another goal yesterday. He'd been scoring them down the stretch. So to me, he was a big one. And I got to tell you, other than the dumb penalties, Sharkov, who really wasn't on the map, might be on the map a little bit now because he showed some clutch goal scoring ability. Bondra for Slovakia, I think he moved up. That's a guy I don't think anybody was looking at maybe in even the first couple rounds, but the way Slovakia played, he played great. Godla wasn't even a drafted goalie. He's certainly going to get drafted this year. He might only be a 4th or 5th round draft pick, but now I think he's worked himself into a draft pick. So I think those guys really sort of stood up. And again, I remember someone asking me yesterday who had Slovakia finishing as high as they did, and none of my experts did.
Yeah, no, they were feisty. It's fun to root for the Slovaks. It was fun in this tournament. It was fun in Sochi too. They're passionate. They really, it was fun in Vancouver. I remember the Slovak Russian game was one of my favorite games in Vancouver. So they're a feisty team. They have a lot of talent, and they've got a lot of they're just, it's so funny how they're so different than the Czechs. Like and it's they feel like there's such a different, like the Czechs have another angle. Czechs feel so much more Russian than the Slovaks feel to me in some ways. I don't know if that's what it is or what it, maybe that makes sense just because maybe they're closer.
In their style, maybe. I mean
their
that
style, but
you're right. The style was bad for the Czechs. They were playing this offensive style where everybody was trying to have a breakaway, and there was nobody willing to pick up a rebound or get in the crease. So they were getting a lot of one-off shots, and it killed them.
That team has coaching issues. I mean that country, because in Sochi they were coached horribly. I felt like we were watching. It felt unfair for Babcock to be going up against the Czech coach. Like it was just one of these things. Like this guy is. It just. The line combinations and just what strategy they were playing. I mean,
what to me, what has to be the biggest disappointment in the end, in the end result was the fact that Sweden played very well throughout the entire tournament, and then comes to the medal round, and they lost to Russia, but then they surprisingly lose to Slovakia. I thought Sweden would win that game, and it really gives a downturn to some pretty impressive performance. I think Lindblom was really good. I think Jacob Delarose, a Montreal draft pick, was very good. And I know I'm biased because I follow the Leafs, but I thought Nylander was one of the more impressive players in the tournament. I mean, he's defensively, he still has a lot to work with, which of course is the reason why he's a Leaf draft pick. But offensively, he's very, very, very poised, had good vision on the ice, set up a number of plays, scored 3 goals. I think he had ended at the end of the tournament with 10 points. The Leafs look pretty good making that draft pick. He looks like he's somebody who with maybe a year in the AHL, maybe less, could step right in the NHL and be very effective.
Yeah, I agree. Kevin, my question for you, with it being connected with USA Hockey, like I know you are, is there a reaction to this? Like whenever a team goes out that's expected to get in the medal round and they don't get there, is there a reaction to this at all? Do you think?
Well, they were very disappointed in that team because they thought it was a good team. They just thought they would perform at a higher level, and I think there'll be some Monday morning quarterbacking throughout this week as they sort of sort through it. But I think they look at the Santini injury as being, big for that team. He's kind of a glue guy, but the one thing I wanted to ask Russ about that U.S. team. Austin Matthews, and I watched the tournament obviously on television, and it's different when you're live, but, Matthews was visible throughout that tournament. Like, he was always in your screen, he was always in the middle of the action, and he obviously is projected to be a very early pick in 2016. Russ, what was your take on the way he performed at that tournament?
Matthews, I mean, he definitely shows a lot of speed for a big guy. He holds on to the puck, he doesn't lose it. In the crease, he was almost impossible to take out, and I felt like even he was a little bit underutilized. It's like, because of age, it seemed like they were sort of holding him back a little bit, where early on in that tournament, he really was not dominant, but one of their better players, one of the 3-4 better players in every one of those games, and I think he got marginalized a little bit, and that's why I don't think he got the opportunity as much as he could, but he really showed himself well, and yeah, he'll be 1 or 2 in his draft. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, he seems like it. I mean, he's fun to watch. He actually reminds you a little bit more of. It almost feels more fair to compare him to Connor McDavid in some ways than it does Eichel. Like Eichel is such a different animal than Connor McDavid, but Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid, there's a similarity to their game.
He could be a symbol of the sort of the post expansion NHL as well. Yeah. An Arizona native. Grew up going to Coyotes games and rooting for the Coyotes, and we don't think of the desert as spawning hockey players, but he came to love the game down in Arizona, which is pretty.
It brings me to two things, Russ. I want to get a question. Sorry, Russ, and I'll let you answer because that's when exactly, Kev. I thought the same thing, and the funny thing about it, I think, okay, so how does a guy like Austin Matthews become a superstar hockey player playing in Arizona? Like he's playing against, you don't think he's going to be playing against top talent. You don't think the coaches necessarily in the Arizona youth hockey, programs are the top coaches in the world. But maybe there are guys like that.
In that case, there are, because I don't know if he's still coaching, but in the early years in Arizona, the ex-NHL player Jim Johnson was coaching down there.
Okay, see
it's the same thing that's happening in St. Louis as well. Like, St. Louis has created a lot of good hockey players, and they had a lot of ex-NHL players that were coaching. McGinnis coached, Kachuk coached.
Yep.
Jeff Brown coached. There were a lot of guys that were in St. Louis that were former players, and that happened in Arizona as well.
And we were talking about how Arizona, the possible savior of the Arizona franchise could be finishing low down this year and getting one of those two, McDavid or Eichel. But 2016 comes around and you have a kid from from the Phoenix area, an Arizona native, as a top prospect in that draft. I mean, how does it set up for the Coyotes if they somehow could get that kid as their first-round pick that year? How it would solidify and help that franchise?
Yeah, Russ, what do you think? And just also kind of your opinion on. I've always wondered this myself. Like D'Angelo in Philadelphia, he didn't get drafted by the Flyers. He looked great in the tournament. He looks like what the Flyers need, right? But you sit there and you watch. But I always wonder about players. Is it good for them to be drafted by their local areas or not? That's one of the things I wonder. Like, would it be good for Austin Matthews to be a Phoenix Coyote? It'd be great for the NHL. It'd be great for Phoenix. Would be, Russ, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it would be bad. I'll tell you the one thing quickly about Matthews. I went to cover a tournament on Long Island early this year, and the NTDP was there, and I was excited to see about 4 or 5 different players, and Matthews is the one that stood out over all of them, and I wasn't expecting that. So that just sort of speaks to Matthews. As far as like D'Angelo, I don't think you have to go any further than when his dad was mic'd up on the NHL Network, and when the Flyers didn't pick him, was like, well, that's the biggest mistake they'll ever make. He said something to that degree, and that is part of the problem when you do get picked locally. He's Sewell, New Jersey. It's very close to the Flyers, so sometimes it is a bad thing. It's hard to say when it's going to be good or when it's going to be bad, but we've seen it work out both ways. It really is a tough one.
Yeah, it is and it is definitely one of those guys. You look at him, and I mean, the Flyers did. I like the defenseman they picked, who he looked really good in rookie camp as well. But it's still D'Angelo. Shoo, he looked like the real deal in that tournament. That was for sure. He was I thought the best defenseman for the U.S. team.
I think Butcher was the best overall, and D'Angelo did what he was brought in to do, and that's bring offense.
Right.
He's never going to be a great two-way defenseman.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
That was USA Hockey's take on it as well. That Butcher was, really stepped up and played well, and D'Angelo, was also. Those are the top 2 defensemen on the team.
Boy, is he not going to look terrible as a Tampa Bay Lightning player. I mean, D'Angelo. Imagine throwing him into that. I kept thinking, oh my God. Yeah. I mean, he's going to fit in like a glove to that team.
It's a pretty amazing. We talked about it yesterday, but it's just pretty amazing, and I'm just stunned at how Steve Yzerman has just gone down there and totally transformed that franchise in so many different ways, but particularly through the draft. His player acquisition, you've got to just grade it at A+. It's the guys that he's brought in there. With the goalie, the Russian goalie that's coming up, and D'Angelo, and the Russian they have playing on the second line, Tyler Johnson, the list goes on and on. The trade for Bishop, he's been a full service general manager. There's no question about that.
Nice.
He only has to extend Steven Stamkos. That's the one thing he has to do.
Right.
Yeah, that to me will be the least of his issues. I think that'll.
Yeah, I think that'll get done.
That'll get done. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stamkos seems to like it there.
Yeah.
And you can blame him. I mean, he's got a good. Certainly would not be very intrigued by the Toronto Maple Leafs at this time.
He told me that, and I believe him. That the last time when there was all this speculation about his interest, he said he never even considered it, and never really even gave it even a moment's thought. And his agent said the same thing to me.
Yeah.
There was a lot of speculation on the internet about it, but he said he really never even considered that. So.
He's on such a good team right now, and the team's so good, and they're young, and they're not gonna be bad in any of the near future, So, plus you're living in Tampa, which doesn't suck. I mean, that just doesn't suck.
No.
Well, The funny thing is, Zach, until Stamkos signs the long-term deal with Tampa Bay, it's still going to be out there. It's still going to be speculated.
Oh, even after he signs it, Mike.
Well, right, but honestly, I think of the two big names, I think there's a greater percentage of a possibility of Tavares going to Toronto than Stamkos, because Tavares for the last few years has been underpaid with the Islanders making. I think he's making a little over I think it's $5.5 million. If he comes up, I think he's a UFA the same year that Stamkos is, or 1 year after. The Leafs could throw $10-11 million at him. Throw max money at him, and that might be tempting depending on how the Islanders franchise is. If they're contending like they are right now, then there's no reason for Tavares to leave. But if they fall back, then there's a possibility.
Russ?
They'll be in Brooklyn. They'll finally have some sellouts. They'll have money.
Yeah, and they'll also be, Russ, a cool factor.
Yeah.
It's cool to play for the Rangers. It's not so cool to play for the Islanders. When they go to Brooklyn and they're in sort of in a downtown area and stuff, there'll be a cool factor with the Islanders. Everything's going to change when they move in that arena.
Playing hipsters with cool shoes.
Yeah, and God knows it's never cool to play for the Maple Leafs, is it?
Yeah.
No. I mean, it's definitely going to be hipsters with cool shoes in the
It wasn't the 60s, Mike. I mean, what are you going to do?
All right. Josh, what do you have for us before we get out of here today?
A couple things, guys. First of all, bad news with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Radko Gudas is going to miss approximately 4 months with a right knee injury. That's a bit of a blow for the Lightning on the back end. In Philadelphia, Claude Giroux successfully put a skate over his padded left ankle today during morning workout. Tested it. Then he didn't know whether it would do him any good as far as playing tonight against the Ottawa Senators, so it doesn't look like Claude Giroux will be in the lineup tonight.
No. Is the kid from? I think the kid from Canada is playing tonight though for Ottawa, right? I heard the captain. I'm sorry, why can't I think of his name?
Oh, Curtis Lazar.
Yeah, I heard he's.
No,
I heard
I
they
don't
were
think
expecting
he's
him.
playing tonight. I think he's meeting the team, but I don't think he's in the lineup tonight.
Oh, okay.
Not sure. I heard he was, but we'll see.
I saw a tweet about that a few minutes ago. Let me see if I can pull it up. Yeah, Curtis Lazar will meet the team in Philly tonight, but will not play. That's according to Senators head coach Dave Cameron. And how about this, guys? I just want to bring up a couple of statistics, point out to you, obviously, with the firing of Randy Carlyle today. He becomes the 11th NHL head coach fired since January 2014. Think about that for a second. 11 coaches in 12 months. And how about this?
Calendar year.
Since April 2013, there's been a total of 18 NHL coaching changes. Shows you blame the coach when your team is...
So in 18 months, half the NHL is turned over in coaching.
Exactly.
So what was that? What was that stat again? It was.
I have. Let me see here.
11 coaches in 12 months.
11 coaches since 2014 in January. 18 NHL coaches in the last 18 months.
Wow.
So if I go down the list here quickly, which I made a list of to come up with that stat, the 18 coaches are Trotz, Maurice, Desjardins, Johnston, these are the guys replacing the others, Berube, Laviolette, Gallant, Lindy Ruff, Patrick Waugh, Peters, Nolan, and then you have the and you have Vigneault. These are the 6 firings recently, within the last 18 months. Torts, Vigneault, Eakins, Carlisle, DeBoer, McLean. Total of 18 coaches.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In 18 months.
That's a lot. That's not a good job.
No.
I mean, I've always preached that I think it's wrong to blame the coach, but I just think it's sad that you have that much of a turnover in that short a period of a time.
You know what's weird? The weirder stat is how many of those coaches were fired right after they signed extensions, because that's like another thing that we've seen. Like that's just
Well, Carlisle signed an extension.
Well, and you know the funny thing is I had a number of people on Twitter send me how messages about the Leafs and how stupid it was and how confusing and dysfunctional it was for them to sign Carlisle to an extension in May, I think it was, and then fire him now in January. And I'm like, what difference does it make to MLS&E? It's just money, and they print it. So giving him a golden parachute, it was a 1-year extension with a 1-year option, is meaningless. So they pay him $3 or $4 million on the end of his contract. It doesn't really affect a thing other than it's tip money for MLS&E. So it's not a factor.
And with that, I announce that Hockey Buzz has been sold to Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment.
I got one more final.
Go ahead, Josh.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, before my workman gets things too loud, my final thing is check out my Hockey Buzz article on Anthony Duclair. I'll do more about it tomorrow, but there'll be an arms race. There is an arms race for the Memorial Cup between Quebec now and Kelowna. It's unbelievable how these teams have loaded up.
Yeah.
Kelowna just traded for Draisaitl, so they're going to load up.
And Duclair, it's a really good article on Hockey Buzz. Check out it. It's why the Rangers are doing the right thing with Duclair. It's definitely.
And let me just say something on a different sport quickly here. For the baseball Hall of Fame, Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, John Smoltz, and Craig Biggio have been named to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I'm sure Russ. I have a problem with one of those names.
Really, no Piazza? Come on.
No Piazza. I have a problem with that list. But
I have a car from Piazza. I bought a car from him. All right, go ahead, Josh. Oh, Josh is on.
Josh is muted.
We're getting.
I'm good. He stole my thunder. I was just gonna.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks, Mike.
That is all the time we have for today.
I let you go first.
I'd like to agree with you, Mike, but then we'd both be wrong. Guys, we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Talk to you soon.
See you later, guys. Gotta run.